Welcome to the AZ Political Podcast. I'm Jim Sharpe. Headline number one, shocker of all shockers, Joe Biden wins the Democratic vote. Donald Trump wins the Republican vote in our presidential preference election. But what was interesting is that Donald Trump didn't get but a little bit more than 3/4 of the Republican vote. Headline number two, President Biden flew into the Valley on the same day that all those Arizona Democrats were voting for him. And he spent the night and the next morning announced at Intel, $8.5 billion in government grants under the CHIPS Act, which would also mean $11 billion for Intel in loans. With all the times he's going to be coming to Arizona over the next few months, let's hope those next campaign stops are not quite as costly. And headline number three, Phoenix City Councilwoman Yasmin Ansari has actually resigned her office to concentrate on running for Congress. As a matter of fact, she wants to replace U.S. Representative Ruben Gallego, who's trying to step up to the Senate in this fall's election. And that brings us to our guest. He's a former Congressman, Matt Salmon, who did 2 stints in Congress after being swept in the Republican Revolution in 1995. Salmon served 3 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives before leaving office. In 2002, Mr. Salmon lost the race for governor to Democrat Janet Napolitano by only 1% of the vote. And then in 2012, he would return in that election to the hallowed halls of the House, where he would serve another 2 terms. So my first question for you, and thanks for being with us,
sure,
is are you done with the House?
I'm done.
You're not going back.
I'm done with politics. I'm always going to be involved on the periphery, doing everything I can to try to help our state and help our country, but I'm not running again. The Republican Party of today is not the Republican Party I belong to, and I'm not sure that I have much of a home in that party right now.
And you actually served as chairman of the Arizona Republican Party at one point.
That was the state Republican Party chairman from 2006 to 2008.
Wow. So you leaving, do you feel like it really made a statement?
As far as what? As far as leaving?
Yeah, leaving politics behind, saying this is not my Republic. This is not my father's Republican Party, and it's not my Republican Party.
I'm really not trying to make a statement or anything like that. It's just, the Republican Party has morphed into something. The Republicans I see nowadays want big government. It's just they want it in their terms.
Right.
The Republicans I see today aren't nearly as concerned about spending. Back in Washington, D.C., the spending is just out of control, and entitlement spending is swallowing everything up. When you look at Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and debt service, that's about 75% of the budget. And when you've got both presidential candidates saying that those things are sacred, they're off limits, I don't know that we'll ever balance the budget. I actually was part of the team that balanced the federal budget.
Yeah. Not
once, not twice, but 3 times in a row. And, it discourages me that the Republican Party is now agnostic when it comes to spending.
Yeah. I wanted to talk specifically about this year's congressional races. You've run for Congress many times.
Right.
How hard is it running for Congress? Because you have to focus your message. Your message has to be focused on your congressional district. But often the way to get the message out is through statewide or valley-wide media, at least.
Right. Well, you have to spend a lot, and the cost of going up on television is astronomical these days.
That's why you should use affordable radio.
That's right. That's why you should use affordable radio. Good pitch, and definitely buy commercials on KTAR.
Of course. Right.
But it's a lot of work. The first time that I ran for Congress was a very spirited primary. I believe there were 5 people in the primary.
Yeah.
And it was not a given at that time that it was a Republican seat. In fact, Sam Coppersmith.
He was a Democrat.
He was a Democrat. He had beat Jay Rhodes. And so, it was considered a swing district. And in fact, probably about 75% of it is now what Stanton represents, and Kyrsten Sinema before him. And so it was definitely not a solid Republican district. And so you had to, you had to please everybody. You had to, well, take that back. What I'm saying is that it was not a partisan district. It was one that you had to appeal to the masses.
Yeah, which interestingly, as you kind of mentioned earlier, there's not really any fiscal conservatives, it seems, left, and I know there are exceptions, in the Republican Party, but it also seems like there's no such thing as a moderate Republican left anymore.
You know, the sad thing is there really are still moderate Republicans. They just hide, even in Congress.
Yeah.
I mean, Elise Stefanik, who now is the Trumpiest person in the world, when I was there, she was one of the most moderate people I'd ever served with.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people have morphed into something else to protect their political skins.
So let's talk about the specific races here. Which one of this year's congressional races fascinates you the most?
I think...
Or when you left politics, just say, I'm leaving looking at politics behind, too. I know that's not possible.
Well, I think that the one that Juan Ciscomani represents right now is going to be a very, very competitive one. He's for the fight of his life, and he actually has a primary election to fight up. I believe he'll win the primary pretty handily.
Yeah.
But he's been a heck of a representative. I've been really impressed with what a stand-up guy he's been, and how he really tries to foster solutions across the aisle, and he's really represented that district well.
A really interesting voice on immigration as well, being the only Mexican-born member of Congress.
Right.
What he has to say about immigration and the border means a lot more than a lot of other people.
You know, it's interesting. He truly is one of those folks that has to appeal to the masses in order to get elected. That is really one of probably two swing districts. The other one is, interestingly enough, David Schweiker's district, which has become a swing district. And, it's kind of sad, though, out of 9 districts, that only 2 of them actually are competitive in the general.
Yeah.
The rest of them are pretty much slam dunks for either party, either side.
Would you also say the same with Eli Crane? I think, what's that, District 2?
Yeah, I think it's a slam dunk for Republicans.
Okay. Because that was really my last function in politics, working in politics, was a lot of that, what that district has become. And you were talking about how hard it is to run for Congress.
Right.
Driving across the
that one's massive.
Parts of northern Arizona.
That district is bigger than a lot of states.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, I think Eli Crane is in for a tough re-election battle in the primary.
Okay. Which is interesting because he's definitely in Trump's category.
Yeah, he definitely is in Trump's category. But McCarthy, who Eli helped oust, is not somebody that just takes things lying down. And from what I've heard, he actually went out trying to recruit a candidate to run against Eli Crane. And they got a very popular former county supervisor to run in that race. And I expect he's going to be pretty well funded, and it's going to be a tough re-election.
You mentioned Greg Stanton, former mayor of Phoenix, who represents a large portion of what used to be your congressional district.
Right.
That is also former Sinema, former Representative Sinema, current Senator Sinema's former district, which is kind of divided pretty evenly between Republicans and Democrats and independents.
On paper. On paper, I think it looks like it's pretty evenly divided, but I think that one is far more of a Democrat district.
Okay.
And I live in that district.
Okay.
My wife and I live in that district, and it's Sinema won it pretty handily. Stanton has held on to it pretty handily. I think beating him by anybody is going to be very, very difficult. I mean, he was a popular Phoenix mayor, and he, from what I understand, he's very out there within the district, communicating with the voters. And I think that's going to be a very, very difficult one for the Republicans to topple.
Let's talk about District 8. Congressional District 8, Debbie Lesko stepping down. She's interesting, and I pointed this out a couple of weeks ago. She's going to run for the County Board of Supervisors, which will actually be more constituents than that congressional district would be. So in a way, it's a step up. A lot of people see it as a step down. But man, there are so many people running.
You're talking about to replace her.
To replace her, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think
it all comes down to the primary.
But it really, even though there's, I think, maybe 10 or 12 candidates running in District 8, there's really only what I'd say 3 contenders.
Yeah.
And I think that the contenders are going to be Abe Hamada and Blake Masters and Ben Toma.
Yeah.
And Blake Masters and Abe Hamada don't even live in the district. And that's a big deal to me.
It would seem like it should be.
Even though technically, you don't have to live in the district to run for Congress. I think the voters expect that you're one of them, that you understand their issues. You've been there. You've lived there in their communities. You care about the same issues that they care about. And I think that Hamada and Masters are going to split that MAGA vote. And I think that really actually helps Ben Toma quite a bit. Ben has been a breath of fresh air. I got to tell you, he's done an incredible job. If it wasn't for Ben Toma, we wouldn't have the flat tax in Arizona. He's the guy that made that happen. That was his legislation, and he's the guy that brought universal vouchers. They don't call it that anymore. It's the ESA's, real school choice. School. He's the guy that brought both of those things, and I think he's done an incredible job as Speaker. Debbie Lesko endorsed him right away. And John Kyle, somebody that's still very revered in Arizona politics, Republican politics, actually all politics. In fact, when he was in, Time magazine put him as one of the most powerful people in the entire country. And he's endorsed Ben Toma. I give the edge to Ben.
Interestingly, if Ben Toma does end up serving in Congress from Arizona, he will have taken a little bit of the path that you took. He serves in the state legislature, and you served in the state legislature. Is that a good path for people who make? It
didn't used to be when I started. Almost nobody who'd run from the state legislature got elected. I was one of the first, that really made that happen. But there was an exception. Bob Stump ran after having been in the state legislature as a Democrat, and then when he got into Congress, he switched to Republican.
Right.
But I think Toma, and being Speaker also is a real drag when you're running for a higher office because you make a lot of enemies in the process because you have to say no.
Yeah.
You actually have to put on the big boy pants and make things work. And sometimes that doesn't make everybody happy. But I got to tell you, I think Ben is a phenomenal guy. He came to the United States when he was 9 years old from Romania.
I didn't even know that about him.
He's an immigrant. In fact, his mother and father left Romania when he was a little boy. And they left because the communists were after his father.
Wow.
And so his mom and dad had to make a quick exodus. And 2 years later, the children were able to follow, but none of them knew that was going to be able to happen. Ben was the oldest of, I think, 3 children at the time. They were on a TWA flight by themselves. He has an amazing story. And when you see somebody that has fled from a communist country, and they come to freedom, those are the best freedom fighters I've ever seen. And I put Ben Toma in that category. I've never seen somebody more vigilant in defending freedom than him.
Wow. Kind of tough, though, to fit into a 30-second TV ad.
Yeah. Very tough.
What a story.
Good guy.
Yeah. So finally, as we wrap up here with former Congressman Matt Salmon, do you see the Trump era ending after this election, or, is it going to take 4 more years of Donald Trump being in the White House before the Republican Party finally moves on from what is really more than fiscal conservatism that is what has been the brand of the Republican Party for so long, and social conservatism has become populism.
Well, yeah. And in fact, during the Trump time, I think he added in 4 years, $7 trillion to the national debt. Obama in 8 years only added about $8 trillion. Well, I say only.
Yeah, right.
Peanuts, you know.
Yeah, we're talking a T here and a T there.
And the funding programs, the welfare programs that Trump put in place during COVID, I think were atrocious. The loans that they put out there ended up being big scams.
Yeah.
And so we threw away a lot of money during his time. And that's frustrating to me as a fiscal hawk. And then on social, it looks like he's kind of flipping the other way on abortion. So he kind of figures out which way the parade's moving and then jumps to the front of it. Fact is, though, I'm not sure it's a given that he's going to win Arizona. When you look at where the votes came on Tuesday.
Yeah.
You mentioned it in your opening. Mm-hmm. He got 3/4. 25% of the people voted against him. And when they did exit polls and they talked to people afterwards, many of them said, many of those folks said, I can't vote for Trump.
Yeah.
And so I think that portends it should portend some very, very big red flags, for the Trump campaign for Arizona. And, for the Senate race, if it happens to be Kari Lake, I find that kind of interesting. Mark Lamb, everywhere he goes, gets standing ovations.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, my wife was the president of Mesa Republican Women, and at the the State Federation of Republican Women's annual event, Mark Lamb got a far bigger round of applause and reception than Kari Lake did. And when people went around and interviewed the bulk, I'd say 80% of the women there were supportive of Mark Lamb. I find it interesting that a lot in the media have kind of made it a foregone conclusion that Lake's going to win. I think Mark Lamb is very much in this race.
He does need to step it up, though, as far as his campaigning goes, because he is way behind in the polling. It's not just name recognition and the media all knowing who Kari Lake is. There is actually, he is quite a bit behind in the polling.
But I'll tell you something, and a lot of the polling, ends up getting flummoxed, after time anyway. The most important poll is on Election Day, and I've seen him out there campaigning hard, and I think he's very much in this race. And I think that it is still very, very possible that he could win. And a lot of those folks that I think Lake would have called creatures of the swamp that have endorsed her are going to end up with a lot of egg on their face.
Interesting. Any other final thoughts on 2024?
I think it's going to be a very interesting race. I hear a lot of people, I know you do too, saying we're the greatest country in the world, the world's superpower. And this is the best we can do? This is our choice, these two?
Yeah. Again. Is what's really frustrating for some people.
Again? Yeah. And so, I've heard that from a lot of people, that they're very, very frustrated that we don't have other options.
All right. Matt Salmon.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jim.
I'm sorry you've said goodbye to politics, because I always really respected you during your time in Congress, and I hope you stay active at least.
All right, buddy. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. The president's visit and the huge price tag that came along with it got me wondering, are there any fiscal conservatives left in this world? Talked about that with Matt Salmon. Think about what Biden announced yesterday. Almost $20 billion in taxpayer dollar grants and loans for one corporation, Intel. Don't get me wrong, Intel is a company I want to do well. I'm a Valley resident, and they're a huge part of our economy. Plus, my mom's cousin was Robert Noyce, the inventor of the integrated chip and the founder of Intel. By the way, my side of the family never saw any of that wealth, or if the previous generation did, we were still living in trailers by the time I was a teenager, so they blew it. I get that there is a certain national security aspect to having microchips produced in the United States, especially with communist China slobbering all over Taiwan, where most are made now. But Intel is worth $182 billion. I'm not griping over the lack of family transference of wealth by mentioning that. I'm griping over the huge amount of transference of taxpayer dollars to a huge corporation. Something I thought Democrats stood against, corporate welfare, and something that Republicans used to stand against. They called it crony capitalism. But it's all changed in the world of Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And that's why so many people who long for the days when people like Matt Salmon counted in the Republican Party wish we could change out the two candidates running for president again. Thanks for watching the AZ Political Podcast. Thanks to my guest, Matt Salmon, for joining us today, former congressman from Arizona. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time on the AZ Political Podcast.